Ja, då är alla så hjärtligt välkomna in på Globala torgets orangea scenen. Hur säger vi det egentligen? Orange stage. Vi kommer att få lyssna till ett jättespännande samtal här i arrangemang av bland annat Svenska kyrkan. Och titeln är Svenska kyrkan, ska jag säga. LGBT in African context, is faith the enemy? Och på scenen så har vi med oss här Annika Hamrud och det samtalet kommer att ledas av JP Mokgethi-Heath och vi har även Jimmy Sserwadda på scenen. Very warm welcome. Kör!
Thank you so much and welcome to this talk this morning. We are talking primarily this morning of experiences that we have had in a context of Uganda and what faith has done in relation to LGBT communities in Uganda. I work for ACT Church of Sweden, and ACT Church of Sweden is the international work of the Church of Sweden in development. And our engagement in Uganda has been through the Uganda Joint Christian Council and other faith communities there. Annika, won't you introduce yourself?
My name is Annika Hamrud, and I'm the author of a book called Fundamentalisterna, de nya kyrkorna och hatet mot HBTQ-personer, som kom ut i våras. Man kan till och med köpa den där sen när ni har lyssnat. Den här boken så har jag åkt till Uganda för att träffa människor som har drabbats av det hårda förtryck som pågår där och har pågått under en längre tid. Jag åkte dit för att jag hade den svenska bevakningen av det som hände där man till exempel fanns det på förslag att det skulle införas en lag som skulle innefatta dödsstraff för homosexualitet. Men i amerikansk press så kunde man läsa mycket mer om att det fanns kopplingar till kristna rörelser som... Jag skulle förresten prata engelska. Visst var det så? Yeah. I'm sorry, but I can just switch. It's just someone has to just point at me so I know what language I'm speaking. So then, yes, so I went to Uganda to maybe see those links to the Christian fundamentalists that have come there in the last decades. I can tell you that I didn't think it would be so open. I didn't think that it was to be so easy to find many gays that have been, where their friends have been murdered, where they have been tortured, where they are afraid of all their neighbors, and I didn't think it would be so bad. And I didn't think that it would be so easy to see the connection with the evangelical movement. But I did. And maybe I should give over to Jimmy, who has much more his own experience of this, because I don't want to talk for him.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you here and welcome to this talk show. My name, as my colleagues have introduced me, I'm called Jimmy Sserwadda, originally from Uganda, born and raised in Uganda, even though after some time I had to migrate and live in Sweden. A senior human rights activist, LGBT person, and I've been working so closely with the LGBT movement in Uganda and here as well. So my attendance today here was to give a short perspective of how it is, being that I'm a Ugandan myself. I'm all in one. I'm a Ugandan, I'm gay, and an activist. Hoping to have a lovely short moment with you because I believe we have a very short time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. So if we just give something of a historical perspective of the situation in Uganda, we know that same-sex relationships were something that were prevalent in Uganda before the Christian missionaries had come. And the martyrs of Uganda, as we describe them now, 47 men who were killed for not wanting to have homosexual encounters with the king at the time, had resisted because the missionaries had taught them that this was homosexuality and that this was wrong. So that dates back to the 1880s. And that very strong attitude from within the Christian communities related to homosexuality is still a current reality. And when the anti-homosexuality bill, a new bill, because there had already been bills in Uganda that are against what they call acts of nature, when this new bill was introduced, this bill did receive support from various Christian communities. Would you like to tell us something about that, Annika?
Well, the bill came after American preacher had come to Uganda and held seminars. Do you remember what they were called? Sorry? The seminars that Scott Lively had. Did they call?
Family life.
Yeah,
partnership.
Yes. So he got a lot of attention. He was invited to churches, to the parliament, and he told about this great threat from. And he has himself written a book where he blames the Holocaust on homosexuals. So he basically said that the genocide in Rwanda, every terrible thing that happened in the world could be blamed on homosexuals. Very shortly afterwards, there was a leader, a member of the parliament, David Bahati, who, together with 3 different church leaders, started to write on a bill. And that bill, when it was introduced in the parliament, said that repeated homosexuality, which means maybe having sex twice, should have the capital punishment. But not only that, it also said that if you rent out a room to homosexuals, you could get 7 years in prison. You can be sent to prison if you haven't reported a known homosexual. So this, of course, created an international reactions. So there was a lot of attention on the law, of course, for some years. But when I try to look at this, I've met people that say that still it wasn't the law that it's the worst, because the most dangerous isn't the police, but the most dangerous person can be your neighbor. And the reason for that is that the law was more of a consequence of the preaching that had been done, very violent preaching. Scott Lively, when he came to preach this, it was already there. So it's like Uganda first was colonized by the British that came with the Victorian legislation that was very sex negative. So, and then came in the 1890s, the Pentecostals and evangelicals come to do as missionaries to that made a lot of people move from the Catholics to the Pentecostal churches. And there it's sort of the, how can I say, the more radical part of the Christians from the state that came. I can't say that all of them preached that the gays should die, but I can say that they preached in a way that if you think a little more, or if you know something about the country, you should understand that the consequence could be violence and that it could lead to lynch mobs. And some people even talk about genocide.
We don't have a great deal of time left. Jimmy, I wonder whether you can just share with us briefly the experiences of living in that situation, and yourself currently being a board member of SMUG, the Sexual Minorities of Uganda. Would you like to just give us something of a context there before we answer the question, is faith the enemy?
Well, it's a bit very uncertain to live in such a situation where I don't know how your tomorrow will be. But as my colleague has been talking about the situation in Uganda, it's like basically the law would have not been the problem itself. The problem is the people we are around with. So you don't know who is who, whom you can trust, whom you can talk to, and then it brings a lot of fear between me and my mother or my sister or my brother. So it has created a situation whereby even people who are close to you, like family members, can really take advantage of the new laws and the new bills and the system and the environment around there to do some bit of hate crime. And me as a board member of SMUG, SMUG is the Sexual Minorities of Uganda. It's a very big organization which covers a lot of LGBT organizations in Uganda. We have been involved in a lot of advocacy work, trying to advocate for the rights of LGBTQ persons in Uganda. However much we know that it will take ages, but we are determined and we shall do that as long as we can. On top of that, we've been trying to fundraise and talk to the police, having seminars with the authorities. That's why now you see that the situation is not so hard as it used to be with the authorities. The situation is so hard with the members of our families, members of the communities, and people around us. But when it comes to the authorities, due to the work of SMUG, it has tried to go down. There are still a few individuals or a big number of people who don't want to show it out. They are really very homophobic and all that. But due to the most important work we've been doing with them, it has tried to be a bit minimal. And that is not done with only us as the Sexual Minorities Uganda, but we have tried to work with a lot of international organizations, like the Church of Sweden. We have RFSU, RFSL, SIDA, and so many other international organizations we are working with. And we target authorities because they are also working with them. So we are like trying to make a conjunction between the international organizations working with the police force, with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, with the UPDF, that's the Uganda People's Defense Forces, to try and, we target them using the same organizations they are using because we are working with them.
So I think it's important for us to be able to say here that not all faith communities stand against homosexuality. And not all faith communities in Africa stand against homosexuality. A good example of that would be that when this anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda was first introduced, there was a very strong letter of disapproval sent by all the bishops of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, a joint statement saying that this was against God's love. And the Church of Sweden, in our work in Uganda, has tried to work with the Uganda Joint Christian Council. We have been working on gender equality, and when we speak about gender there, we say to them, gender is more about just woman. Gender is about sexual diversity. Gender is about humanity. And we have worked on this to be able to engage people from civil society as well as from the churches to be able to talk to each other, to make the linkages. And I have to say that the Swedish government has been very supportive in providing safe spaces that we can create dialogue. But there's a long way to go. Annika, maybe you can give us what you think is a way forward.
I think that the only people who could really make a difference are the pastors from the evangelical churches. I think that they need to go to Uganda or to broadcast over social media from everywhere where they are and preach love, which seems to have been something that they have forgotten when they traveled. It is very strange in a way to say this, but when I have gone to Uganda, very often the planes are full of happy American teenagers and early 20s. They think that they are going on a great adventure. They are Christians. They have a strong belief. They think that they are good. I'm sure they think they are very good. And they go to a place where I'm not sure that they know to point out on the map. And they seem to, no one has told them what they are going to do, that they are going to preach love. I'm not sure that I can tell them to go and do that. I think that it's very difficult for someone who is LGBT. I think that the Swedish church can use their ecumenical work to talk maybe to the mainland churches, the ecumenia or something, and then the ecumenia who feels maybe like they are cousins to the Pentecostals can talk to them and put pressure on them, because I don't think that we can do so much, because we as persons, as we would want to do, because it is a matter of faith for the people down there. Everyone has a faith. All the gays too, they are also members of the same born-again churches. And so basically that is what has to be done.
So just let me say, as this is Book Mesa, there are clearly books related to this topic which you can get. One of them is Annika's book, which is available at the back. And then if you go to the Church of Sweden stand, which is just across from us there, you can find copies of a book that we have published, Behold, I Make All Things New, which looks at human dignity and human sexuality from the perspective of the three Abrahamic faiths, and shows that there's nothing within those sacred texts that justifies homophobia. Jimmy, I give the last word to you.
Yes. My last word about the thing, you asked the question what can we do? And before I could answer that, I would respond to the question on the board app, is faith the problem? In the Ugandan perspective, I don't think the faith is the problem, but the people, or the persons, or the leaders, or the preachers of the faith, because people are preaching the Bible differently, basing on how they read it or how they feel it, and how their wishes are. The same applies to the Muslim fraternity. We are preaching the Quran basing on the way we think about it, or basing on what we think as persons. So faith itself is not a problem, because, I mean, homosexuality has been there, and it will be there. But the way we, the preachers, are preaching the Bible and the Quran and all that, to me, is the biggest problem. And then, in the Ugandan perspective, it's like the main churches are a bit liberal. But then we have the evangelicals, which my colleague has been talking about, because for them, they're extremely very radical. But still, they are not preaching, they are not being so radical simply because of the teachings. Again, for them, it's worse, because it involves investment. I mean, they are getting a lot of money from the Americans and worldwide evangelicals and the Russians and all that. So if somebody's earning, it will be very hard for that person to do what? To change his mind and perspective. He has to do what the boss says or what his donor is doing. So that is also another problem there. But what can we do? We have to educate the masses. For the LGBT movement, we've been trying to do our best to show them that what they think of us is not what we are. We are doing the other way around. They think of you to be thugs, you do the right thing. They think of you to be uneducated, you go to school. They think of you to be, you know, Reuters and robbers and all that. They think of you to be rapers and all that, you do the other way around. Because in order for them to manage and convince the whole community in Uganda, they were talking about gay people being rapers, pedophilias and all that. But we also come out and say, no. It doesn't matter whether it's a straight man or a gay man, as long as you're engaging in sexual acts with a child who is under the age of consent, that's wrong. So we also preach what is right. And then preach love. Start by your neighbor. Go on until the world comes to the end. But we shall just have to go on continue preaching love and speaking out what we feel is right, as long as we are doing it in the right circumstances, at the right time, in the right places.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Annika. And let me just say to you, very briefly, today is Thursday, and we are part of a campaign, Thursdays in Black, towards a world without rape and violence, and that includes the violence of homophobia. Thank you.